One thing that makes the e-commerce space so vibrant is it attracts people who aren't afraid to color outside of the lines. And one of those individuals is the author of the Hype Handbook, Michael F Schein, who we get a chance to chat with today. Now, Michael is a true hype guru and doesn't just share the basic definition of what hype is, but rather how to use it and why it's so damn important. Now, because hype has a bit of a controversial reputation, we dive into a discussion on the ethics and boundaries that companies need to create so that they're not just offending people unnecessarily, but rather being strategic about challenging the status quo and leveraging this unique marketing approach to receive out of the ordinary results. So without further ado, let's dive in. Welcome to Popup Advice, the place where masters of entrepreneurship, leadership, and e-commerce reveal their secret tips and tricks for becoming the top dogs in their field. These candid conversations will give you exclusive strategies that turn your good idea into a great success. Let's dive in. So for Michael, for those who aren't familiar with you and your story, maybe you could just give us a bit of an introduction.
Well, the short version, and I'm trying to make it short, is that I'm a writer. I wrote a book called The Hype Handbook, which came out with McGraw-Hill a few years ago. And I am also a business owner. I own, I guess, what most people would call a marketing agency or marketing company called Microfame Media. And there's a whole lot attached to all of that. We say that we help idea-driven businesses become famous in their fields. We do work with a lot of different businesses. The bulk of the businesses we work with are venture-funded startups.
And so when you refer to hype, what do you actually mean here?
So I am well aware that that is a word that for a lot of people has negative connotation. And in a way, that's why I chose it. I mean, everyone talks about marketing, right? And what that should mean is what I consider hype. It should be getting a lot of attention so that people buy from you. But I specifically chose the word hype for a couple of reasons. The way I define it, even though some people consider it a negative, is any set of activities that drives a huge amount of emotion from a large number of people to get them to take a certain action. And one is that I used to play in bands many years ago, and I don't know how good we were, but we were really good at packing a room. And we never used the word marketing. We always used the word hype. So we would hype up a show. So one funny example is we talked our way onto Showtime at the Apollo because we knew we would get booed off. And in doing that, we got a lot of attention, and we got on the cover of New York Press, which was a big alternative magazine. So things like that. So I really felt like the most effective marketers are almost never marketers. It's rock band managers, hip hop managers, but also propaganda artists and some really nasty people. But if you can extract sort of the psychology that they understand and then reapply it ethically, that's what I'm interested in.
And so is there way, or have you seen certain platforms performing better for generating that hype, or are there more physical strategies that, like, what platform would people want to jump onto, would you say?
Well, yeah, again, I mean, I think technology platforms are accelerators and are amplifiers, and it's also a way to meet people where they are, right? So my whole approach, or what I recommend to clients, is quick experimentation is important. So let's say there's a hype strategy called, there is one that we call make war, not love. It means that you can say how great you are and people will say that's very nice. But if you stand against an idea, people will be attracted to that. So I can say, I really think it's important to have simple systems at work. Well, that's interesting. Or you could be like the Basecamp guys and say, fire your workaholics. Workaholism is a cancer on your business. Well, that spreads like crazy, right? So that's a principle. Now, what I often say is you don't know exactly how that's going to play out. There are a million experiments you could do, and most of them will fail. Now, you shouldn't just do any experiment. It should be guided by one of these psychology principles, these hype principles. But so you want to put the smallest experiment you can possibly do out into the world and have a set of criteria to kill it as quickly as possible if it doesn't work, or adjust it. Now, one of the things that digital technology is good for is running experiments quickly and measuring them quickly, right? If you send people out to street corners with signs, that has worked very well for a lot of people, but it takes a lot more doing, I mean, you have to go out and put a lot of resources into that. Whereas I can do the same thing online and do that quickly. However, and it's also about meeting people where they are. I'm a business to business company. My market is on LinkedIn, and so LinkedIn works very, very well for me because that's where they are. TikTok doesn't. Everyone uses it, I guess, but like it's mainly younger people who don't own businesses, right? And also my stuff needs a little room to be explained, and it doesn't work as well in 15 seconds, right? So I think you want to think of where are they, how quickly can you disseminate those things, and how can you get creative with how you use the platform?
Yeah. Do you ever receive like pushback, like how we were saying in the beginning that hype kind of has a negative connotation?
Yeah, I love pushback. I mean, first of all, I should distinguish between what I'm calling hype and being a troll. What I'm talking about is having very strong points of view and packaging them in a way that builds a tribe around yourself. So I'll give you I love pushback. So I'll give you a very specific example. I left a corporate job, then I became a freelance copywriter, demand generation copywriter. And the few people who hired me liked my work, but I ironically was very bad at attracting attention. And that was because I was trying to be a marketer. I had gotten really kind of adult and professional in my old age, and I forgot what made me so effective back when I was playing, punk rock. And so at a certain point, I just had nothing to lose. And I had talked my way into a column at Inc. magazine. And would your audience know who Gary Vaynerchuk is?
Yeah.
Well, he was going around at the time, this is probably about 10 years ago. And even more than now, it was just like screaming and yelling, like hustle, hustle, hustle. Like he would say, if you're not tweeting at 3 a.m. on the toilet, then you're not working hard enough. And I would hear this advice, and it seemed the only person getting rich was Gary. You had all these young people who were following him who were broke, but tweeting from the toilet and burning themselves out. And my business was, my approach was use systems, right? So I wrote an article for Inc. that said why Gary Vaynerchuk is flat out wrong. And I didn't insult him. In fact, I said that he was a brilliant business person, and I said Wine Library TV was great, but I said that his advice was wrong and that it was more important to build systems. So first of all, he saw the article and he responded to me directly with a ranting and raving video that started out very nice, and then by the end he was sweating and yelling. His followers started blowing my phone up and calling me lazy and an idiot and this and that. And it was funny because I've never worked so hard. I was working around the clock, so I was trying to make a living. I hadn't figured it out yet. And I went to bed that night thinking that I had screwed myself up for the reason you're saying. I just insulted the biggest guy in marketing and I got pushback and this. And then the next morning, I looked at my Twitter, which is what I was on more at the time. And I don't remember, it was like 50 or 80 new Twitter followers overnight. And I had about 40. I mean, I was a nobody, And all these people started like writing me and saying, hey, I've been thinking the same thing for a long time, et cetera, et cetera. And it was like the start of my career. I started to build a reputation as this guy who was for the non-Vaynerchuks, because no matter what you're thinking, other people think the same thing. But if they don't have a leader to rally around, the one who like raises their hand first and says the emperor has no clothing or whatever it is, there's a lot of opportunity there. So I think intensity is the most important thing. I think you want an intensity of a reaction. But I also think you need an ethical filter. I mean, that doesn't mean tell lies. That doesn't mean try to leave people worse than you find them. Andrew Tate fails on both accounts, right? I mean, he's really good at driving negativity and intensity. And I guess he's made money, but he is a liar. And he leaves people worse off than he found them. And guess what? He's going to go to jail, right? Yeah. So I think both are important at the same time.
So I'm curious to know, in your experience of working with different companies, has there ever been a cool example of somebody really catching the drift on what creating hype looks like, and maybe what one of their campaigns looked like or something?
Yeah, there are plenty. I mean, I think Basecamp is a perfect example. They play in the customer relationship management space, which is about as exciting as sheet metal production. I mean, that's not exactly the most, inherently exciting space. And they were competing against Salesforce, which became very, very, very huge very quickly because they invented a category. I mean, before Salesforce, there was no cloud-based customer relationship management. There was Act, which was a good tool for its time, but it was on your desktop. So Salesforce invented an entire category and got rewarded well for that. So instead of trying to compete with them directly, Basecamp basically came out and said, they wrote a book, the two founders, called Rework, and they had a blog called 37 Signals. And the mission was the way we work today, or the message, I should say, was the way we work today is completely backwards and completely broken. So they say, if you have someone who is constantly bragging about how many hours they put in, why is that good? Why aren't they getting it done more efficiently? If a client says to you, jump, and you say how high, that's a ridiculous way to do business. If your product does a certain thing and every time a client comes to you for a new feature, you add it on, you're going to have this big vomitous ball, of a product with 7,000 features on it. And so their whole thing was a line in the sand. Simplicity is key. Don't just do what your clients tell you. Give them a good, simple service, restrict options, fire your workaholics. Now, why did they do that? Because they have a product that is a CRM tool that does like 5 things. It totally changed the dynamic because they could have gone out there and said, hey, our product is great because it's simple and you should use simple. And then you say to yourself, why would I want simple when I can get something that does everything, right? But instead they said the way you're looking at the world is wrong. And that appeals to people because we all know something's wrong with the way we work, right? I mean, we run around like chickens without a head and we get less and less done every day. Well, yeah, their tool does deliver on that. So when people say to me, well, this hype stuff works great for literal rock stars, rock bands, but how does it work for someone like me? I have a SaaS company. Well, yeah, of course. I mean, the principles are the principles.
I feel like the public is very capable of just kind of like sorting through the information. So it's just looking for something novel to all of a sudden spark it. So,
well, and there are other things too, right? Like if you just throw your ideas out into the world, out into the void, they may never be noticed. But one of the things I talk about as well is something I call build a secret society. So what you'll find hype artists do is they always make it look like their success is very grassroots. Like they just had this great idea, put it out, and everyone just organically followed it. And there's some of that, but what they tend to do is they spend a lot of time building a circle of very, very well-placed people who have their own followings, who will do anything for them behind the scenes. And then the minute they're ready to put something out into the world, they get all of those people to just spread that for them, Like Tucker Max did that. He switched from being a frat tire writer to owning a company. And he did $1 million in revenue in his first month because his best friends are Ryan Holiday, James Altucher, and Tim Ferriss. And he just said to them, share my stuff for everyone. And they did it because it's the way you would tell your friend to help you move a couch because they're a clan. They do everything for each other. So you want to build a clan like that who will do that for you when the time is right. And there are ways to do that.
Yeah, I think too, it's a great point. Like it's also the people, right? I think we always think it has to be, like we were saying, like a social media, like a metric sort of thing, but it could also be like your community is also part of that megaphone to the world.
I mean, everyone is so focused on doing the new thing. I mean, we have a client who we encouraged to create. There used to be these things in the back of comic books that a lot of baby boomers would remember called Charles Atlas. It was for like a weightlifting program. And it showed this skinny guy in a comic, like it was like a cartoon, like getting sand kicked in his face. And then it said, buy the program, this. So we encouraged them. They created a big foam board parody of that thing for their service and sent it in the mail. Oh, because wow. Because every client for them was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. So why be on social media? A 65-year-old person in this legacy sort of industry gets a giant foam board in the mail and it reminds them of their youth. That's a lot better than getting it in their email box.
Yeah. Wow, very, very true. Because I think it's like that same you've got to stand out mentality. And I get why social media is attractive if you're just starting out. But if you already know like what your demographic is and you already know the value of each customer and what that retention is going to actually fuel, I think it just allows you to elaborate a lot more
I
on
think you should think of social media like a power drill or a power saw. Saws have been used forever. And a power saw is quicker than one of those saws that you just like work by hand, but there's a time to use a saw. So these really are just tools, and some are faster than others. But I bet you there's a furniture maker out there who gets a competitive edge and makes something really beautiful because they use a hand saw in certain circumstances instead of a power saw. So I think you got to get creative like anything else.
Well, Michael, this has been an awesome chat just as we wrap up here. Would you have a top piece of advice, but specifically for e-commerce merchants? What would you say to them?
If instead of saying, okay, we're going to invest our entire budget in Facebook ads because we're convinced that that works, you know what I mean? And then you burn through 90% of your budget and then find out that that didn't work. Instead, separate your budget into 12 buckets, 15 buckets, and do really small experiments. And think of them as colleges. I remember when I was in school, there were like safety schools, reach schools, and target schools. And your safety schools, like you knew you were going to get into, but it wasn't that exciting. Your reach schools were like, I probably won't, but if I do, it's going to like make a massive impact on my career. And then there's the ones that maybe, maybe not. So do your safety experiments on a small level. You know, put a little bit into that and they'll probably get you something, you know, but won't be explosive. It'll be incremental growth. And then do your normal ones and then do your reach experiments. That's the things that probably won't work, something really crazy. But if it does work, you might have explosive growth, right? And then track, if you do a small experiment, try to make it replicatable. That's not going to make you a star. But if you get replicatable results, then put all your resources into it. But don't do it in the beginning. I think having that experimental approach is probably the one thing I would teach e-commerce in particular, and just business, because you have to have so many transactions, but business in general, really.
All right. So for people trying to connect with you, Michael, and to hear more about your services and connect with what you offer, where's the best way for them to find you?
My company is called Microfame Media. That's fame, not frame. People get it wrong all the time. So it's microfamemedia.com. My website is michaelfschein.com, Schein. But the best way to learn about me and to get these ideas would be to get the book. I really put everything I know into the book. It's called the Hype Handbook. And if you go on Amazon, it's certainly there, but it's in a lot of other places as well, and a lot of Barnes and Nobles. And if all you ever do is read the book for whatever it costs, it goes somewhere between $18 and $28, depending on the deal. Nothing would make me happier. I'm a writer at heart. And if you read it and then say, hey, I need to talk to this guy, he might know a thing or two, that would be awesome as well.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate that so much. I'm sure our audience will jump at the opportunity to connect, and I hope you have a great day.
I feel the same way. Thank you.